Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation and to welcome back Dr. Shefali to the podcast. And we're going to talk about her new podcast that is out this week. And, you know, all things conscious parenting, the awakened the awakened family. If you don't know Dr. Shefali, Oprah has endorsed her work as revolutionary. She has written 4 books, 3 of which are New York Times bestsellers, which I just mentioned, The Conscious Parent and the Awakened Family. She holds a doctorate in clinical psychology from Columbia University and specializes in the integration of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy. As an international speaker, she speaks at events around the globe, spreading her message of conscious parenting and mindful living. She also has a conscious coaching institute where she trains coaches to practice her philosophy and spread its message around the globe. She also has a private practice, it says here, where I'm going to get the phone number of and call her and make an appointment after this.
So I actually have written 7 books. So that must have been an old bio, but no worries. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, 7 books. That's amazing. Okay. Well, sorry, we got an old bio, but
No worries.
yeah. So thank you for joining us. Let's just dive in. What is this new podcast? I'm so excited.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for it as well. I was waiting for a long time for the right time to do this, both in my personal and professional life. And also just to see what the market really needed, because we all know that there's so many podcasts out there with experts, right? You're having me on right now. So I knew that we didn't need another podcast necessarily with experts. So I've really done a different kind of parenting podcast where I only do real-time interventions with parents who come to me with their struggles, they're in the throes of anxiety, anguish, panic, and I help steer them back to the shores of sanity, and of course also give them tools and strategies to work with their children. But as you know, I teach conscious parenting, which is first and foremost about the raising of the parent. So that's what this podcast is about. It launched this week. Every episode has different parents talking about different struggles. It's called Parenting and You. And what I've done with the podcast is that no matter what the struggle is, I've tried to relate it to universal principles in parenting. So the listener at home will always be able to take away nuggets of wisdom that they can apply in their own life experience. And I think, lastly, I'll say that the reason I chose to do this format is because parenting can be so isolating, so lonely, and so guilt-inducing and shame-inducing that we typically don't share our work with others or our pain with others. So this allows parents to feel less alone.
That is so invaluable. My daughter's about to turn 5. And so I'm in it. I remember reading your books, 6 years ago and, or 5 years ago as she's a baby and like just really trying to be conscious. And we have the best intentions, but then life comes at us and we get burnt out or we're unresourced or we're just not sleeping. And all of a sudden, we're a live wire trigger board.
Exactly. And until the parent begins to recognize their trigger board issues and their dysregulation, we really won't be able to help our children in a sustainable way. So parents who come to me and they want the script or they want the 3 nuggets or the golden key, I can give that to them, and I do. But first, I must help the parent see in real time how they're getting in their own way and manage their own anxieties. Because if they don't recognize what they are bringing to the table, They can say the most beautiful poetic words to their children. They can tell their 12-year-old daughter, love your body. You're the most beautiful human being. But the daughter sees that they are filled with self-criticism, they have food issues, then the daughter is going to pick up a different message. That's why I teach the message of conscious parenting, and that's what this podcast is going to focus on. How does the parent truly get out of their own way and begin to recognize their own patterns in real time?
So helpful. And maybe we'll get into a little, taste of your podcast later, and we could go through a real life issue I'm dealing with. And we could,
Yes, I'd love that.
yeah. Reparenting. I think that this is such a, and just like, I think it's your philosophy of conscious parenting. It's like using the child as a mirror to reflect back and go, oh, our child's pushing our buttons. No, they're not. They're revealing to us where we still have wounds that need to be tended to from our childhood.
Yes.
And so how does reparenting look like? Knowing that, and I'm conscious of it, but I'm just like, let's just say one of my kind of programs is frustration. Like my father was a big, giant 2-year-old and often threw tantrums as a 40-year-old man or whatever he was, just because of life stresses and his upbringing. And so I really like soaked in that programming of rigidity and can't make a mistake and mostly critical of ourselves, but then it's spilled over into the family. And so of course, as a child, if he's having a tantrum, we're going to take it on and think it was our fault. So I'm watching myself getting frustrated, knowing that I'm repeating this pattern, and I've done a lot of work and I'm trying to, not be frustrated. And then I'm watching her. I know too much, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of putting that energy imprint into her as well. So how does reparenting look in that moment, in that circumstance?
Well, I know you're beating yourself because sometimes we know too much, so we're harder on ourselves. But here's the big difference between you and your father. You are aware of it. So, yes, you may still lose it for 10 minutes, but you're not going to lose it for 10 days. And you're definitely going to correct and make, repair. And that is so powerful in conscious parenting that we tell our children, it's not you, it's me. I am the one who is feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. I had a tough day at work. The minute the child hears you take accountability and own your own crap, so to speak, that is going to hugely absolve them of the burden of carrying your pain. So it's completely different. Your frustration, albeit it's still called frustration, but conscious frustration is very different from unconscious rage, unconscious pain. So you don't realize perhaps how powerfully, profoundly different it is to be aware versus unaware. And that's the key difference. And that's why I teach consciousness, because the minute we infuse our present day reality with consciousness, so even though you're eating the 16th cookie, but you're aware, just there's a gap, there's a space. You're not fully asleep. There's a part of you that is watching and witnessing. Yes, it is a weaker part than the unconscious part, but it is at least present. So your goal and mine and all of ours goal as a parent is to keep expanding that witnessing energy. It's not to reprimand ourselves for not having complete control. It's to have compassion and say, at least I had witnessing energy around my lunacy. And now I have to grow that witnesser. I have to keep growing the witnesser. And with compassion, and we go to our children and go, it wasn't about you. You know that mom is messed up today and mom is just dysregulated and I'm sorry. And you move on. Because if you keep going over and over with self-reprimand and guilt and blame, now that's setting off another pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to accept that we are limited human beings. See, I think the thing with us parents is that we're so delusional sometimes that we expect ourselves to be almost perfect. And that is a delusion in and of itself, right? So when parents come to me saying, oh, I'm feeling so embarrassed that I don't want to tell you that I cursed at my child, I work with them around that guilt and shame because it's coming from a place of paradoxical delusion of grandeur that they should be perfect, right? It's a wounded part of us that says we should be perfect. So it shows up as this guilt, as if we should never make a mistake, as opposed to going with compassion. I am flawed, I am limited, and of course I'm unconscious. Look where I came from. So the best I can do is begin to infuse unconsciousness with greater and greater moments of consciousness. That's the best I can do, child. And tell your child, listen, you've met grandpa. That's where I came from. I'm working on it. Be patient with me. You need to know it's not you. And, we work on that muscle every single day.
Yeah. And it is amazing. Like I see this concept of repair is like a life changer, like a lifesaver and a game changer, because we didn't have
Yes.
any of that growing up in our
Yes.
generation. And so we did take everything on and kind of dealt with our stuff silently, only to have to unpack it, throughout our whole
Yes.
lives.
Yes.
So yeah, I witnessed her, even this morning, I got upset with her for something because we were making these cards for her teachers, and then she got angry. So she started erasing like all the work that we had done. And I go, Fret. And she's like, I'm sorry, Mom, I just got angry. So just like that, for her to be able to put words to how she was feeling, which drove her behavior. And as a result of like me repairing in the past, going, I'm sorry, I just frustrated, I'm over. It was like even though it was like I got frustrated and I was beating myself up, the fact that she could name what she was feeling, I was like, okay, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that 10 years ago, let alone when I was 4.
There you go. So that's why I said conscious frustration means frustration that will eventually lead to repair. Now, building that muscle, frustration to repair, is such a gift in life because that's going to teach her she doesn't have to be perfect and it is safe to repair. Now, you in your ideal perfectionism don't want to ever get frustrated. But then look, you wouldn't be teaching her how to deal with her frustrations when she does get frustrated. I think a little bit of messy is always healthy for our children. They need to see us just a little crazy every once in a while. But it's reining it in, right? It's like pulling it in. But our parents were so grossly unconscious. That's why we're so scared of unconsciousness. We feel like, oh my goodness, now I've damaged my kid completely because we were damaged by that extreme level of unconsciousness. But a little bit of unconsciousness peppered with awareness, repair, and then a dialogue, and then a lot of unconditional love and acceptance is really healthy. It teaches our children that life is messy, nobody's perfect, and it's icky and messy, and but we can come out of it.
Yeah. It is so good because even, I just turned 45 and I had this moment earlier this week of having like real anger and where I screamed in my car, and it was about nothing child related and she wasn't in the car. But, I felt this like shame of feeling anger. Like we do have this anger is the spectrum of human emotion that we're going to feel. Frustration is as well. So I think as you're talking, like the reparenting is the waking up and going, oh, okay, I'm getting triggered. And as long as we're not like swept down the river and lost for 10 days, 10 hours, and we can like pull ourselves out and start to observe us in the emotions and start to feel it and let it go through. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I got really angry. It drove me into action to take care of a situation that I probably should have gotten angry about 6 months prior. And it was very effective. And I was like, oh, anger is not like something we should feel shameful about because I'm a conscious person or a spiritual person or whatever. It's like, no, that's part of a human emotion that drives action. And if it's processed, contained, expressed in a healthy way, it's just part of being human.
Absolutely. And we've created this modern world where it's completely unrealistic to think we're not going to get angry. And so anger is both a powerful vehicle for change and a powerful vehicle to help us realize something is amiss. Like you said, I should have created this boundary 6 months ago. And that's your wake up call, right? That's another lesson for you. Oh, what made me wait for 6 months? Oh, I was afraid I wouldn't be liked. Oh, I was afraid I wouldn't be accepted. And then anger builds up. So anger doesn't just come out of the blue, it's really a symptom of lots of missed moments of self attunement, right? Why are we angry? Because we feel like another or ourselves have betrayed a boundary. And it's consistent boundary violations that lead to anger. And at times, people get blinded by that anger. So we never want that. But we do want, constructive anger, empowered anger, conscious anger, anger that says clearly, I am triggered, and even anger that could say, I'm triggered and I need to curse and scream right now. Give me a moment. I'll be back. And then you go to your car and you let it out and then you come back. How can that be anything but super healthy?
Yeah.
But I think anger is really a symptom of micro, endless, chronic boundary violations.
Mm.
And so when I see a mob, right? So say I see a mob of people of color, for example, and they're really angry and people will say, oh, look, they're so angry. I would rather reframe it as, wow, they must have experienced a bazillion microaggressions and boundary violations to lead them there. And I see this with my 21-year-old, she'd say to me, I got angry to you, mom, because you didn't listen the first time. I still think she's extreme, but I have to take the lesson, right? Oh, damn, like she's not allowing me to even repeat myself, right? Like children today are like so savvy. She won't even allow me to violate her like just a little. And I'm like, wow, my parents violated me all the time. Like what's in a little bit of violation? But I love, like you said, our children now have the language to tell us to back off, and then I have to work with that. And then when I get angry, I have to then ask myself, wow, why did I tell that person to stop 6 months ago, right? And that's our generation's issue.
Yeah.
As girls, as women especially, we didn't have the red flag, right? Today, children are learning about red flags, right? I'm like, wow, no one told me I needed to have, right? When did we learn about red flags in our generation as women, right?
Yeah.
Everything was a green flag for us because we were told to adjust and compromise and give. So now we're learning a new way.
Yeah. The only red flag we ever learned was like, don't accept candy from a stranger, I think. And that was it. That was as far as it went.
Right. Don't run away with someone immediately, but you could run away if they're very rich and very good looking, maybe.
If they
Right? I
take
mean,
care of you.
right. Like I grew up in India, I still laugh because in India, we were told don't have sex till you're married, but you can go ahead and get married. Like you're too young to have sex before marriage, but you're okay to get married. And I laugh all the time because we're raising our girls so differently now, and I think that's pretty incredible.
So you have a 21-year-old. What are your other children?
I only have one, thank you very
Just have,
much. And
okay.
then my own dirty dozen inside me that live
Yes.
inside me. I have 13 children, 12 are my inner children.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So the 21, I mean, you were in the heart of social media at its peak and COVID and all of the things that are causing our adolescents, so much anxiety and OCD and depression and just, oh my gosh, did you how did you navigate that with your daughter? Because I know you talk about control and we're not here to be the authoritarians in their life. Like, what is kind of your philosophy about social media and our young kids today in those teenage years? I don't know that I would have survived back, if we
I
had
know,
smartphones in the 90s.
I know. So, I've spoken a lot about social media and its utterly volatile, vituperative effect on our children. It's really, really toxic. And I at least raised my daughter for the first 13, 14 years without the smartphone, right? So I had that. When you're raising your child now, she's going to start coming to you at the age of 7 and 8 and will want a smartphone if you're not really, really careful. about who she hangs out with, right? It's really who she hangs out with. And if you have a cohort of other mothers who are all on the same page, then she's protected. But I was able to raise my daughter for the first 13, 14 years without a smartphone. And I was the first generation, I was in the cohort of the first generation of parents who had exposure to the old way and then to the new way. Like it happened right as our children were turning teenagers. And I thought it was the coolest thing on earth. I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. Go ahead, take an Instagram account. We didn't know anything, right? My generation, I'm 7 years older than you. We didn't know anything. We thought it was so cool. And it's only in the last 4 or 5 years that the data has really come out as to how toxic it is. I'm just grateful that my daughter hasn't fallen through the cracks, but I've worked with so many young adults who are deeply in the mires of the effects of social media, the comparison, the isolation, the taunting, the bullying that occurs. And I really plead with parents to keep children as much as possible away from the smartphones because their brains cannot handle. I can barely handle what I see on social media. I'm sure you can't either. I mean, have you seen what women, really, it's women mostly, post on social media, and it's designed to make you feel like you need to be skiing in the mountains at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and then take a Pilates class at 4, then cook some vegan organic food at 6, and then do yoga at 7, and then go and do a charity event at 8. I mean, if you're not doing, and then raise your 6 children, if you're not doing these things, you're not a competent parent, right? It's designed for that. So if we as adults have a hard time sifting through the weeds of social media, imagine a 12-year-old.
Oh my gosh. What, as you were talking, I was also thinking about, the last time you were on, you were talking about radical awakening, your radical awakening. And I'm at that age, in the last few years going, oh my God, wow, did I abandon myself? Wow, did I lose myself in this, that, or the other thing? And so I saw a post recently that you said, you're not falling in love, you're falling in need. And so just take, step back and just watch that, to be conscious when you approach all your relationships, not just parenting, and go like, why am I so attached? Why am I grasping so much? Do I feel, it's all those insecurities and safety issues coming up. And it really is like we are going after someone that's going to be a better version of the parent that we didn't have, whether it's our mother or father as a young. Can you expand on that? Because I think it's so profound if people can just go, oh, that's what's driving my behavior in this crush or obsession or drama that's unfolding in my relationship.
Yeah, and I was talking about my book, A Radical Awakening, which I think every woman should read. And I wrote it during my own radical awakening, as you said. So here's the thing. Until we awaken, and there's no perfect culmination of that awakening, but at least we begin the process, we will attract out of need. I mean, there's just no escaping it. Because, unless we were raised with super conscious parents, and I've really never met any human who doesn't have to heal, including my own daughter. She's going to have to do a lot of healing. We are going to attract based on need because we were raised to be displaced from our own inner power and knowing and depend on our parents who got a high and were intoxicated on control and power of us. They manipulated our very being, our essence. They told us who to believe in, what to believe in, when to get married, how to be a boy, how to be a girl, how to achieve, what's a good life, how to be happy, when to be happy. And because of that acute engagement in childhood and the fact that we had to divorce our true self and leave it behind in childhood, we then, got conditioned to look for these missing pieces in other people and in other things. Men typically began to look for things, and I speak stereotypically, in the career, in the bank balance, in the ladder, the achievement. And women were acculturated to look for those missing pieces in our image, in our external image, so that we could be desired and valued and validated by the other. It could be the school teacher, it could be the nurse, it doesn't matter, or the lover. And then at midlife, hopefully, if we're very lucky, we've realized that, damn, this other outside thing is not only not filling me up, it's freaking depleting me. And now, am I brave enough to look in the mirror and really examine what the hell I'm doing here in this dynamic? It doesn't have to be, again, with an intimate partner. It could be with your boss. It could be in a career. This X thing on the outside, whatever that X is, and daring to look in the mirror to ask, who would I be without this, is really the most terrifying question that we will have to face at some point, because life is benevolent in its cruelty. It will force you to come back home. Now, the sooner you stop resisting and listen to its wake-up call, then life will be easier. But we resist because of how it will look in culture. What will my parents say? What will society say? And we don't dare to look. When I had to look, I first I didn't want to look, and then I couldn't not look. And then I pretended to, change it, I tried to change myself even more so that it looked different. But eventually I had to ask my question, my soul wake-up call question of, do I want to be authentic or do I want to be liked? Do I want to be authentic or do I want to be approved? Do I want to be authentic or do I want to be safe? And midlife is a wonderful time to begin asking those questions, because you see the ravages of time and you're like, damn, clock is a ticking. And how much longer am I going to fake it to get the approval from my social media followers or my book readers or my culture or my parents who were never there in the first place, which is why I'm here where I am. So it's a very scary place. But I think for women between 45 and 60, life comes knocking at your door and beckons you to wake up.
It certainly did. I hope you don't mind, but just in all of your consciousness, like, what is your spiritual belief on all that? Because you even mentioned, you've done all this work in conscious parenting, you had your awakening, you're, so present and so conscious, but your child's still, you still weren't the perfect parent. You're still human, and your child's still going to have some things to unfold and unpack, because she came in with a soul and a purpose and gifts and things to learn. So what is I just love to ask, like, what's your overarching philosophy of, like, why are we here as humans having a spiritual experience? Is it like a classroom? Is it are we in a rung of the ladder of the social, the soul's evolution? Like, what's your how do you find safety in a world that's just unsafe, or, the unknown, uncertainty?
Yeah, so I'm quite a pragmatist, and at the end of the day, quite in the here and now. So I don't spend too much time wondering about past or future lives. You have the statue of the Buddha behind you. I have the image of the Buddha right there. You can see him. So I just practice. And the reason why I say the Buddha is not because I'm religious, but because he taught one principle, fundamental life wisdom, which is be in the here and now. And life is impermanent. That's it. So if I just focus on these two things, I'm okay. I don't feel unsafe accepting that. I think that is the radical acceptance, really, to accept that life is fragile, it is impermanent, be in the here and now. What that comes with is a level of detachment and a level of freedom. Because at the end of the day, I don't own my daughter. I don't even own my own body. I can only own it insofar as my mind will allow me, right here, right now. But literally, you and I could leave and both of us could, die. And people find that morbid. I find that liberating to wake up to. And I've accepted that. And I'm safe in that acceptance. I'm so safe in that I don't need to create any other theories about what will happen to me when I die. I don't need to know. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. I'm so okay with the unknown of it. And I've accepted that I will never know, and no one really ever knows, because if anyone ever knew the truth, they'd be the next Jesus. Even Jesus didn't know. So there's no knowing. And people don't like to not know. So then they conjure up all these theories of the future down to a T, right? Like as if they know. And that's because they are not in the here and now. And the here and now is too scary.
Yes, the uncertainty. But yeah, but being in the present, that's where all the masters are like, that's the moment of enlightenment, or that solace is found in the present moment, just being present and being aware of the here and now. I love it. It's so simple, but so profound.
Yes.
Just as fellow woman to woman learning here and taking advantage of your wisdom and your experience, I'm, a recovering people pleaser, as many women are, and perfectionist, and I'm trying to navigate, like, in this moment right now, I'm probably at burnout, like my voice is in my throat, I'm like, haven't slept well, I've got too much on my plate, I say yes to too many things. What's your kind of, how do you make decisions? How do you set boundaries? Do you tune in? Like, how do you say yes or no? What's your trick for that? How have you learned to honor yourself at the risk of pissing people off or disappointing people?
Yeah. I had to really see my wounded part of being an incessant pleaser. I know I have a part in me that is so unconscious, I'm scared of it. Like it can still pop out, and I'll be like, damn, it came out again. And I so began to study my own disease to please. I began to understand the triggers. When somebody comes to ask me something, that is like a big trigger, like, oh my goodness, I need to put my defense up. I know when my child comes to me, I know what my cues are, my weaknesses, and I've studied it. So I now know that I should not trust myself to be wildly uninhibited. I have to truly be defended because I am a hazard to myself. To this day. The other day, I gave something for free, a big thing, and my friends were like, can you please check in with us? And I was like, but I felt so bad. And they're like, we know why you do it. We all know why you do it. That's not the excuse. So because I'm a hazard to myself, and I don't want to be a hazard to myself, I have learned to put into place some practices. So the most obvious practice is, check in, number one. Number two, ask for time. Like, I'll get back to you. Let me think about it. Interesting idea. Oh, I hear you. I see you. And the third thing I've done is, because I know I come from the heart like you, and I don't want to close the heart and be a bitch, I've now learned to be in the heart, but just not give anything. Just my heart. And I've learned to understand that giving the heart is a big deal. That's expensive. But on top of that, I don't have to give my time and my resources and my entire, set of belongings away. I don't need to do that. That is now where I've come to rest. I want to be loving. I want to be empathic. I can give my sweetness, but don't give away real things. I mean, I was giving away money like anybody to anybody, and people knew. And even my daughter was like, Mom, you're like, you're like honey. You're like a candy shop. Why should they come and they just take? And I thought that was being a good person. And it was to a degree, but I was damaging my own bank account, my own resources. And that wasn't okay with me. As I grew in self-love, it wasn't okay for me to abuse myself anymore. I'm my own biggest abuser. And of course, then the other one is taking advantage, but why shouldn't they? Right? If I'm giving 20 candies for free, they're going to take one at least.
Yeah.
So I cannot begrudge the other. I need to learn to be more vigilant. Now, that's our problem, right? The people-pleasing person's problem. But the other side of the issue are the highly avoidant people who are working behind too many walls, and they need to learn to begin to relax and get into their heart. So I think there are two essential kinds of problems: people who live too much in their mind, disconnected from their heart, and people like us who are too much in our heart, disconnected from our mind. So it's that toxic femininity. I was executing toxic femininity and then blaming all the men around me, right? And toxic masculinity is too much separation, too much taking, not enough giving. And toxic femininity is too much giving and not enough receiving. So now I'm learning to come into the center of real discernment and who to give and how to give, and really to give out of abundance, not out of need. uh, I was giving so much out of a neediness to be liked that I ended up being robbed and betrayed.
Yes, I can relate. Um, Beautiful. With relationships and parenting, asking for a friend, if you and your partner just have completely different parenting, I mean, just I think with my own parents, like my mom said, we were fine until we had kids because we just had totally, I'm sure you see this in your practice all the time, totally different approaches to parenting. And so how does one overcome that? I think, like, I don't know. There's no real question. I guess you just both have to be open to having the conversation and finding the middle ground. But I guess what is the right balance of parenting when you are just totally opposite
Yeah,
philosophies?
so just to console your friend, this is a very common issue. I get this question every single time I'm in front of a live audience, and every second or third client I get in my coaching practice is handling this issue. And listen, who we fell in love with, now we have realized, was mostly out of need and dependency and a hunger to be validated and loved. So right there, who we fell in love with is already an illusion. The second big illusion we confront is the person we thought we married is a completely different parent. When they become a parent, that's now a whole new set of rules. Now you're like, I liked you when you were single and when we were not parents, but I really don't know whether I admire you as a parent. Being a parent is a whole other set of skills and requires emotional maturity and growth that you will not see in your partner until they become that parent, and you won't see it in yourself. So it's a crapshoot who you're going to get. You're like, no, he's wonderful, he had great parents, or she, whatever, and so stable, been in therapy. I'm like, good, 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 check, 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 that's good. But now you still don't know who they're going to be as a parent. So the first thing is, don't lie to yourself. It's okay in the secrecy of your own private thoughts to say, you know what? I loved this person and I even love this person now. But damn, I really don't like them as a parent. Just to say it is liberating and so scary, right? Because you don't want to ever admit that you made a mistake. But guess what? You couldn't have known that. You didn't know that. Nobody knows that. So this is the beauty of life. It's endlessly unpredictable. And as much as we want to check off all the boxes 20 years prior, you're not going to be able to. And the next thing is, you don't know how you're going to grow. So who you were at 22 is not who you are at 45. Nobody could have told me I would be divorced at 45. Nobody, because I would not have believed it. Even if they thought it, I would not have agreed. So it takes you by surprise, and that's the beauty of life. And I think when we put ourselves in these, very tight boxes called marriage, and call it sacred, and then a divorce is a curse, we screw ourselves over, really, because we don't allow ourselves the potential to grow and the grace to grow. And we just shame ourselves. So what is the answer to two parents not getting along in terms of parenting? If it's extremely unconscious on the other side, yeah, and the other parent is really out of control, I believe, this is unpopular, that our allegiance is to the weak and the vulnerable. So parents will have to confront that the child and their parenting is more important than their partner. And this is a tough one because many people are like, your marriage should come before your parenting. To a degree, in terms of time spent, but not in terms of unconsciousness allowed. Because this child is weak and vulnerable and in your care and under your auspices. So how can you expose them? No, I believe that when things cross a line, I or the other, the wife or the husband has to speak up at the cost of the marriage. That's just my radical view. because the child must be protected. The child came to us without, asking for abuse. They didn't ask for this. And so it's where you place your allegiance when things get really tough. Now, if it's just a little bit of bickering, like you don't mind a C grade, but they want an A grade, go see a coach. I have so many couples who come to me and kind of work it out. But if it crosses a line, then we are, going to have to put the relationship under scrutiny.
Yeah, totally agree with that. What about one lesser where the other half is not fully unconscious, but, and this is not my hypothetical, this is witnessing some people that I know, and just age old tale of like the parents stay together for the kids, but they don't sleep together. There's no love in the marriage. There's tension. There's tension because they live in the same house, but they're out of love and they both have their own lives. Like, is that healthier to stay together pretending you're married, but you're not, or all in the house, even though they know that dad and mom aren't really like, friendly? Or is it better to separate, in your opinion, and have two happy parents in separate houses with all of those kind of icky logistics that come with it?
Of course, if you can stay together in a friendly way and your kids are young or the money is tight and it makes more sense for one to be in the basement and one to be upstairs and one to be in the left wing one, then of course that is better for young children because you don't want to go back and forth. But if there's going to be animosity, tension, and strife, then buy the house down the block or find an apartment down the block. 100% children prefer peace, stability, harmony, and flow. It's more toxic to have stress in the house just for the sake of checking off the marriage box.
Love that answer. Thank you. I grew up with, being kind of good at a lot of things and having so many interests. And I remember having a wish or a regret or looking back on my life. I had this dad who I already described, and my mom was just such a great mom and so loving, and, kind of gave up her dreams to be a mother. And my thought was, I wish she had pushed me more I was so good at everything, and she's just super chill. She was like a, 60s flower child. I wanted her to push me more, and then there's all this conversation about like not controlling, the soccer dads that push their kids too much and they become fully tattooed and a rock star, a drug addict or whatever it is, so it's like that balance. But so I'm trying to navigate like, I have my husband is about not pushing at all, like letting the kid be the boss and determine what they want to do, and everything is okay. And, thankfully we have the resources that they can kind of get what they want in every moment, and they don't have to be in too many uncomfortable situations. And I'm like, I kind of feel like because of my upbringing, I want to push a little bit to like, make them follow through on something. Or if they are in something, like say, oh, you could get to this level if, lay it out, like just give them awareness about working hard and the things that I never had awareness about that I kind of wish I had known, to see how far I could excel in one thing, if that makes sense. What's that fine line between pushing and totally letting the kid just flow and lose?
Yeah, but you're talking about two extremes. You don't want to push and you don't want to just let go. We have to do what you just said, the middle ground. Like, here's the potential. Here's where all you could go with this. And yeah, let's be in uncomfortable situations. Don't rescue your child all the time. But again, the child should always be the leader. So if the child wants to do ballet and give up violin, then fine, we go with ballet. But it doesn't mean that when they next say, I want to now climb a mountain and give up ballet in two minutes, I let them. Right? You're allowed to say, okay, let's do ballet, but let's do it for 6 months and see. You're allowed to say it's a 6-month trial, but it doesn't have to be a 6-year trial, right? Some parents will say, no, if you're going to do it for your entire high school. No, it doesn't have to be that extreme either. So I think there's a way I just posted a video on Instagram that my way of helping parents to navigate that fine line is look at where your child already is in a joyful way and begin to push them in increments. So, okay, you did 10 minutes of piano practice. Oh my goodness, amazing. Let's do 15. right? Don't do 1 hour, do 15. And then from 15, after a few weeks, we do 20. Go in that stepwise, ladder-wise gradation, because you will both push them out of their comfort zone, but also not take them so far that they're so uncomfortable. And it's about you, right? And that's a beautiful way to titrate it. But that means that the parent has to be present and attuned and listening to the child and not afraid to make them a little uncomfortable, and to tolerate those tears, right?
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm like already having, again, she's 5, so the smartphone thing is not an issue, but I'm sure it's come up so often with you recently and in your own child. What if they're 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, their cohort all has smartphones. They have parents who kind of like give them a lot of liberties. Like, how would you walk, if you're like hard rule, you don't get a phone until you're in high school. How do you navigate that when they're like, I hate you, slam the door, like, and you're, because that's an extreme that might push them to rebel in a worse way down the line. Like, how do you manage
Yeah.
that balance? I don't even know where to
Yeah,
start.
you start now. You start talking about it now. Because it's our new drug, just like you would talk about drugs, you start peppering in now. Do it now when they're young and impressionable. These phones and all these teenagers, they're always on their phone, and then they get angry with their parents, and they don't understand that the phone is so destructive. You could start building that consciousness in her right now. I remember when my daughter was young, I would teach her about stranger danger, right? So we would role play and how to fight and how to call for help. I did that as part of her childhood because I needed her to have some tools. In the same way, you need to begin to talk about it. And the same way you talk about alcohol or drugs, you begin to pepper into her consciousness these elements that before you know it by 12 is going to become something that she's going to have to confront. So the next 7 years are your stomping ground to begin to teach and practice, and really embed it, because what you do with her now is going to show up at 12.
And then last question. Has there been, I know, we're always in evolution, you're always learning. Has there been a time recently that you kind of approached something with your daughter that was like clearly, in the conscious parenting book or like logical to you or me, but then you learned something new? Like she did something that was unpredictable and you were like, oh, and it woke up a new level of understanding and a new technique or approach. Was there something new that you kind of discovered recently that you're excited about?
Well, I think I'm constantly aware of how judgmental I want to be and how I have to always reframe the text. Now we text, right? So we're texting all the time. So, for example, I want to say, why didn't you pay the bill, right? Without even knowing, I'm presuming she's not paid the bill and I'm angry already, right? And then I'll delete the text and I'll be like, let me know when you pay the bill, right? Or did you take the dog for a walk, versus let me know when you've taken the dog for a walk. Or, I hope the dog had a good walk. You see the difference? Yeah. One is coming from attack mode, making her defensive. I'm an interrogator. I'm a doubter because I am. I'm constantly cynical, which I am. I'm learning to trust her more. And so I'm learning to move into more of a respectful tone. So I'm just always aware, and I'm not ashamed to admit how disrespectful I can be, because I just presume that she doesn't know. So, for example, today she drove a car that she has not driven for 7 months because she was away in Europe, 4 or 5 months actually. And so many times it crossed my mind to text her, to disturb her while she's driving. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And so I had to watch that and then go underneath that to ask, what am I really worried about? And well, I'm worried that she's not driven, and I'm worried that she's going to have an accident. And then when I went deeper, I don't trust that she can handle this. And right. And I'm terrified because I don't trust. So then I began to talk to myself. How can you trust? She's already out there. Can you give her some, empowerment that she can do this. Why are you so distrusting? Because I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid if she has an accident, then I'll be called to the hospital and I don't have time. So ultimately, I'm afraid for myself, right? So I had to do this whole talking through, and I did not text her. And she has no idea I went through all this in my mind. But that's what I think we parents have to become better at, watching these thoughts, managing our thoughts, and not projectile vomiting them onto our children, But I'm constantly amazed at how actually sensible our children are. I know it sounds so demeaning that's not even a praise. Like if I told my daughter, wow, you're so responsible, you put off all the lights, she'd blow me up, right? She'd be like, that is an insult, that is not a compliment, because my expectations are so low. So I'm always impressed, and I realize that that's just all my stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I've got to pay attention more probably where I do it with my 4-year-old, but especially, I remember like you start to anticipate based on past behavior
Yes.
that my dad's going to blow up, or that she's going to have a tantrum, or she's going to get scared. And, and then we have all this anxiety and they feel that energy, and then it's just perpetuating the cycle. So to really, this is part of the reparenting, really go, oh, what is my motivation for sending this text? And then just get yourself in that calm, trusting, empowering way is a huge.
And within
practice.
reason, I told her 6 times already, be careful, be careful, be careful. Then we have to shut up, right? So it's like we've done our part. We gave them the good food, but now if they sneak a candy when I'm not looking, I can't control every minute, right? We can just do the best we can, show up the best we can. It's that same thing we talked about earlier. All we can be is in the here and now, and recognize that we can't ultimately control or dominate anyone, barely ourselves.
Ooh, let it go.
Yes.
And let God. Now, okay, so what is the name of your podcast? Where can people find it and tune in as soon as they hear this? Go follow Dr. Shefali's new podcast. What is it called, and where can people find you?
Yes, it launched this week. I only do real life interventions with parents. It's in the moment. It's like being a voyeur in somebody else's coaching session with me. And you're going to get so many nuggets that you can apply in your own life, because I ultimately always talk about mindfulness, presence, and how to tame the mind. So Parenting and You, it's out everywhere podcasts are heard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's so good to see you again. And I'm so excited to tune in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.